Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, King Clifford Jefferson, Senator Godfrey, the fifth kind of Van Juice, son of Folkville of Jerusalem, on the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know here at the Third Timothy English Church of England as King Edgar, points up as Jesus Christ. It is May 9th, 2024, which we know in the Berber year 2974. I greet you in the name of my Archbishop Belmont, House of Belmont, as well as all my members, officers, and all those who are inquiring about the Third Timothy English Church of England. And I definitely want, without definitely not forgetting my queen, Sister Galveston from the House of Galveston, which gave me the ability to be able to plant my seed in the soil, which was most suitable for my growth. So, once again, this is another marvelous lecture for my heirs and my successors. I hope that all those who will be here today to pay attention, because it's pretty much going to be parakeeting or camelbacking off the past three lessons that I did in regards to the ethic of exposure, right? Part 1, part 2, part 3. This video is not based upon the ethic of exposure. It's going to be tailored towards that, but this is going to be based off what we call the Exchequer. The Exchequer. So I'm gonna go back over some stuff we went over yesterday, as well as the previous lectures that I did, just to once again to keep the narrative. But we're going to go into the justification of why the Ashkenazi Jews, which are the Scottish Jews, which came about as a result of the Jewish diaspora, right? And we know that these Scottish Jews that came about in the Jewish diaspora were the ones who settled or migrated or immigrated to what we call Scotland, and which resulted in the Scottish Enlightenment of the Scottish people, who are now, based off the Enlightenment, have, due to what we call the Scottish diaspora, immigrated to what we call here North America, and passed those traits over to what we call the colonies. All right. It's very important to understand where I'm going with this, because this sets the tone for the movement of the Third Timothy English Church of England, which is the intellectual movement, right? So please pay very close attention to what's being said, right? Please pay very close attention to what's actually being said, right? Greetings, Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont. Exchequer. Exchequer. In the civil service of the United Kingdom, which we know is Great Britain, His Majesty Exchequer, or just the Exchequer, is an accounting process of central government and the government's current account, i.e., money held from taxation and other government revenues. In the Consolidated Fund, the term is used in various financial documents, including the latest departmental and agency annual account. Peace, 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 whoever that is. Welcome. All right. So in civil services of the United Kingdom, His Majesty Exchequer, or just the Exchequer, is the accounting process of the central government and the government current account. We know that in dealing with taxation, in regards to one of the greatest things that can be taxed, which is land. This is called what we call an escrow account. An escrow account is called a trust account that all brokers, escrow agents, stakeholders who are licensed by the state, who are the what we call the shareholders or the stockholders, to be able to uh, set up what we call trust accounts. All right, and trust accounts are accounts for the grantee on behalf of a grant that he got or a conveyance that he got associated with what we call real property. This real property falls under what we call fee simple transaction. Fee simple transaction results from what we call common recovery, all right? And the common recovery results from lawyers, all right? Corrupt lawyers who turn N.J.L estates into fee simple. So when you get into the N.J.L estates that were turned into fee simple, this goes into what we call the history concerning how fee simple states came about. And this was definitely due to British government or the British departments that were created under the British government, which we call Great Britain. You know, Great Britain came about through the Treaty of Union of 1707, which resulted from the Union of the Crowns of 1603, which was spearheaded from what we call the Treaty of Perpetual Peace of what we call 1503. Okay, so it's very much for you as a student here to understand these terms and these references, so that way we can be on the same line. Okay, so the main reason or the main definition for the word exchequer is called a current account, right? Historically, it was named of a British government department responsible for the collection and the management of taxes, revenues, making payments on the behalf of the sovereign. And auditing official accounts. It's also developed a judicial role along with its accountancy responsible in tried legal cases relating to this revenue. This goes into what we call courts of chancery. All right, that's where that comes from, or courts of exchequer, courts of chancery, or courts of exchequer. The exchequer was named after a table used to perform calculations for taxes and goods in the medieval period. According to Dialogus de Cascario, Dialogues Concerning the Exchequer, an early medieval work describing the practice of the exchequer, the table was large, 10 feet by 5 feet, with a raised edge or lip on all sides or of about the height of 4 fingers to ensure that nothing fell off it, upon which counters were placed representing various values. The name exchequer referred to the resemblance of the table to the chessboard, as it was covered by a black cloth bearing green stripes or about the breadth of a human hand and a checker pattern. The spaces represented pounds, shilling, and pences. Okay? Exchequer normally. For that, it said it was a transaction account. Most of you are familiar with that term, transaction account, all right? Or what we call a current account. A current account is what we call account based upon payment on demand, which is we call a checking account, all right? A checking account. So let's review that real quick. The majority all have checking accounts. Either one of the two, checking account or what we call uh, uh, a savings account. A transaction account, also called a checking account, or current account, is a demand deposit account or share draft account at credit union, banks, financial institutions, etc. All right. At credit union, it is a deposit account or bank account held at a bank or other financial institution. It is available to the account owner on demand. It is available for frequent, immediate access by the account owner or two others at the account owners as the account owners may direct. Access may be in a variety of ways, such as cash withdrawals, use of debit cards, checks, and electronic transfer. And in economic terms, the funds held in a transaction account, i.e., exchequer account, are required as liquid funds. in accounting terms, they are considered as cash. Thank you, Brother Sniper. Lack of a better name, we'd like to know your national name so that we may address you thus forth. Right? So as a result of this transaction account, which is a checking account, we definitely need to look up Wildcat Banking because this Wildcat Banking was resulted from going away from the Exchequer, which was created for the king's king's revenue. All right, it was created for the king's revenue under the authority of what we call the courts of chancery. We know the court's chancellor or the Lord Chancellor was responsible for what we call the king's consciousness. Well, if the king's consciousness is not there, then the court's chancellor can't do his job, and then he's left up to deal with other issues in regards to what we call now wildcat banking. Anybody ever heard of that term? Wildcat banking? Just look that up real quick. We talked about it many times in previous lectures. We're going to pull it up again for the sake of the argument. Don't forget to subscribe, share, as well as donate if you can. That's all, everyone. Thank you, sir. I want to give a shout out to Brother Earl Burgess from the House of Burgess for his short narrative of the last three classes, which he posted on ethical explosion and the reason why part 3. And I might say I'm very impressed by the language that he used, and it shows me that he's studied. You know what I'm saying? He's watching the lessons, he's articulating the lessons, and he's digesting the lessons through his articulation of the lesson, and then regurgitating and giving it back to me so that I know that he's up to par. All right, so this is a shout out to our brother Earl Burgess from the House of Burgess. All right, because apparently those from the House of Burgess of Virginia didn't know this history that we're giving to the people now. Right? So wildcat banking. Everybody look up that term. Wildcat banking. I got to get my coffee. You know how we do. A notice to the wise. whatever you see here at the Third Timothy English Church of England by those who are coming on this platform, please do not try to incorporate this stuff inside of whatever thing you got going, because it will not work, and I will hold you responsible for it. I might not say nothing, but when um when I get whiff of it, I will address it and I will deal with you accordingly based on what's being presented. Because a lot of people don't believe that I am who I say I am, right? A lot of people don't believe I'm who I say I am, but you can tell I'm who I say I am based off what I present to you in a reasonable fashion, very well articulated. I might stutter a little bit. I'm only human, you know what I'm saying? But still, I'm not a wolf in sheep clothing, all right? I'm not a wolf in sheep clothing. The wolf in sheep clothing are those who originated when they took over the 23rd dynasty of the Libyan, which we call Berbers, under what we call um, uh, the Assyrian conquest of the Berber territories, which align with other alliances made by Scottish and Frankish descendants, which I'm going to prove without a shadow of a doubt. But before we do that, I must address the the purpose and intent of why these things are happening as a result of what we call violation of antitrust law. All right, they're using something that does not belong to you, and they're benefiting off something that don't. I'm a part of. They're using something that don't belong to them, and they're benefiting off something that don't belong to them, and that's the English system of government. All right, no matter what part or what aspect of government, it's the English government that has been taken over. All right, or what we should better say, the Anglo-Saxon government, because we know in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, they said that the English government, known as the writ and the uncoded law known as the Magna Carta, was was the way of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Okay, and they did not associate them with any other nation, whether they were from Europe, whether they're from Africa, or whether they're from Asia. All right, so it's very important for you to understand that. All right. So in regard to the exchequer, which we know is a transaction account, we know transaction account is an on demand account for the holder in due course of the actual instrument that needs to be redeemed by the one who acts as the teller to be the redeemer. All right. And we know according to the Constitution, Article 16010, the only lawful way that an instrument can be redeemed is in lieu of lawful money, which is, you know, is not paper currency. All right. Which is the 99% of how all commercial transactions are done today is by commercial or paper currency. All right. Very important for you to understand that. Try not to hold you long, I promise. Wildcat Banking. Wildcat Banking was an issue of paper currency in the United States by poorly capitalized stated chartered banks. All right. This Wildcat Bank existed alongside more stable state banks during the free banking era from 1836 to 1865, when the country had no national banking system. So they didn't have a national banking system in the United States. All right. The first Bank of America was called the Bank of America. All right, which got a loan from the Bank of England. All right, if you know that history. States granted bank charters readily and applied regulation ineffectively, if at all. Bank closures and outright scams regularly occur, leaving people with worthless money, which you see occurring in this present day. Right? Banks being closed every day. Bank of America and all the other ones. Operating in remote locations with limited or absent financial infrastructure, Wildcat Banking supplied a medium of exchange in the form of a bearer's note that they issued on their own credit. All right. These notes were formerly redeemable in species, i.e., gold or silver coin, but typically collateralized by other assets such as government bonds or real estate notes. You hear that? Real estate note is an instrument called a deed of conveyance, which is based upon the fee simple method of conveying real estate, because that's where the actual money is. Because the only way to make money is by with real property, and real property is known as real estate. All right, or occasionally by nothing at all. Hence, they carry the risk that the bank could not redeem them on demand. All right, so the bank cannot redeem the medium of exchange known as wildcat money or bank money, which you call a bearer's note or a dollar bill. The actual redemption for that instrument, which is as the medium of exchange, was supposed to be for gold and silver, but gold and silver took another circulation. Why? Because those who run the system of the monetary or the medium of exchange are those Jews, all right, which are called money lenders, and which is why you had the statute of Jewry passed in 1275, all right? So let's get with this information. Exchequer. The operation of Exchequer in Normandy is documented as early as 1180. This Exchequer had broader jurisdiction than English Exchequer, dealing in both physical and administrative matters. The dialogues concerning the Exchequer presented it as the general belief that a Norman king established the Exchequer in England on those loose models of Norman Exchequer, while noting with some doubt an alternative view that the Exchequer existed in Anglo-Saxon times. The specific chronology of the two exchequers founding remains unknown. Exchequer in Wales. It is unknown exactly when the Exchequer was established, but the earliest mention appears in the roll writ of 1110 during the reign of King Henry I, son of William the Conqueror, the one who invaded England, in which the Jews made their entry into England. All right. They made their entry into England in 1066 with William the Conqueror from the Jewish diaspora, and then they were kicked out of England and then migrated to Scotland, which they were kicked out in 1290 through the Scottish independence. All right, through the Battle of Dunbar of 1295, and then they were allowed to re-enter by way of the Commonwealth that's established by your monarchs of Great Britain, i.e., the Scottish monarchs, which are your Scottish Jews, which are your money lenders. All right. And the system that they had here then is now instituted in what they call the North American government, i.e., instituted through what we call the state of New Jersey, which I'm going to prove. Okay. The oldest surviving pipe rolls, I got to talk slow because I know AI companion has to keep up with my words, so I'll try to slow it down. Right. So it says the oldest surviving pipe rolls is that of 1130, already in mature form, indicating that such records existed for some time beforehand, though they did not survive. Pipe rolls form a mostly continuous record of royal revenues and taxation. However, not all revenues went into the exchequer, and some taxes and levies were never recorded in the pipe roll. Under Henry I, a procedure adopted for the audit involved the treasurer drawing up a summons to be sent to each sheriff, who were required to answer with an account of the income in his shire or county, both from the road designated lands and from the count farm or form of local taxation. The chancellor of the exchequer then questioned him concerning the debts owed by the private individual, because these debts were called crown debts. Everybody, when they get time, look up the Crown Debt Act. I forgot what year it was passed, but it was called the Crown Debt Act. By 1176, the 23rd year of the reign of Henry II, son of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, the ruler of Jerusalem, which is the date of the dialogues concerning the exchequer. The exchequer was split into two components: the purely administrative exchequer of the receipts, which collected revenue, and the exchequer of pleas, a law court concerning with the king's revenue. Appeals were to the Court of Exchequer Chamber following the proclamation of the Magna Carta. Legislation was enacted whereby the exchequer would maintain the rims prototype for the yards and pounds. This nominal standard was, however, only infrequent enforced on the localities around the kingdom. From the 1190s to the expulsion of the Jews in 1290, there was a separate division for taxation of Jews, and a law case arising from between Jews and Christians called the Exchequer of the Jews, which we'll talk about in a second. Through the most of the 1600s, goldsmiths would deposit their reserve of treasures with the Exchequer, sanctioned by the government. Charles II, a Scottish monarch, through the restoration under the Commonwealth of England, shut up the Exchequer in 1672, forbidding payment from it, and what Walter Bagott described as one of those monstrous frauds. This monstrous robbery. This ruined the goldsmith and the credit of the Stuart government, which would never recover it. In 1694, the credit of William III government was so bad in London that it could not borrow, which led to the foundation of the Governor and Company of the Bank of England. Okay, everybody see the rabbit hole that I'm making, right? So let's move forward. Because it's all about the Exchequer, and Exchequer means an account. All right, a current account. A current account must be maintained. All right. They call this what they call it. Corporations. Bookkeeping entry. Double bookkeeping entry. That's what it's called. Double bookkeeping entry, all right, which is required at the end of the year. That all income must be recorded based off that account, which they call a current account, okay? Whether it's money being deposited, whether it's money being loaned, they must keep a record. And we know my last name is Jefferson, right? First name, my first name is Clifford. My last name is Jefferson. You know, the Jefferson comes from Godfrey, the fifth caravan Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem, right? And we know the Jews were kicked out of Jerusalem, all right? And under the expulsion of the Jews, the rules and the laws governing their expulsion was governed by Godfrey, the fifth caravan Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem, descendants, all right? Such as Henry II, his children, John, Richard I, Henry III, and his descendants, Edward I, Edward II, Edward III, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. All right. So it's very important to understand that where my surname descended down from, which was from Staffordshire, I'm going to address it from my first given name, which is called Clifford. All right. I'm making a connection there. In lieu of what was already said. Clifford. History, family, crest, and coats of arms. Semper Paratus. The history of Clifford family names begins after the Norman conquest of 1066. He lived in one of the parishes by the name of Clifford in West Yorkshire, Herefordshire, and Gloucestershire. Of the three parishes, Clifford's Chambers in Gloucestershire is the oldest, dating back to the Saxon time when it was known as Clifforda in 932. By the time of the Domesday Book in 1086, where all were listed, the parishes were registered as either Clifford or Clifford. Okay. And the name originated in Herefordshire. Very important. Why is this important? First, let's deal with Hereford. Hereford is a cathedral city in the county town of Herefordshire of England. It lies on the River Wye, east of the border of Wales. south or west of Worcester, with a population of over 53,000 in 2021, and is the largest settlement in Herefordshire. As early town charters from 1189, granted by Richard I of England, described it as Hereford in Wales. Hereford has been recognized as a city since time immemorial, with the status being reconfirmed as recently as October 2000. All right. So it says that Hereford has been recognized since time immemorial under the Plantagenet King Richard I of England, which created the term or the concept dating back to what we call time immemorial. So the word of the term time immemorial has a legal meaning, which is concrete, versus the abstract meaning, which goes back to the story concerning the Jews, the government concerning the Jews, the government concerning everything that is portrayed in the biblical references. All right. I'm not giving you that. I'm giving the concrete references which make reference to the English Church of England, where the biblical story is the counterpart, is the contrasting story or the abstract story that you now believe in, and that only came about through the Gregorian mission in the 6th century by Pope Gregory I through the Gregorian mission under Saint Augustine, All right, so it says an early town charter, i.e., a grant from the grantor to the grantee. The grantor was Richard I, right? And it says Hereford has been recognized as the city since time immemorial. So let's go and look at the concept of the word or the term time immemorial. Time immemorial is a phrase meaning time extended beyond the reach of memory, record, or tradition, and indefinitely ancient beyond memory or record. The phrase is usually legally significant context as well as in common parlance. So majority of the people base their argument on this particular understanding of what we call time immemorial, which means memory, record, tradition, outside of what you normally remember. Okay? But in law, it has a meaning in reference to as well. So let's get the definition from a legal perspective. In law, time immemorial denotes to a period of time beyond which legal memory cannot go. A time out of mind. Most frequently, the phrase time immemorial appears as a legal term of art and judicial discussion of common law development in the United States concerning the property rights of Native Americans. So they associated the concept time immemorial based off the abstract dealing with the property rights of Native Americans, not knowing that the true concept of time immemorial from the concrete perspective goes back to Richard I, the one who created the concept. Okay? Very important for us to understand that. Time immemorial is frequently used to describe the time required for a custom to mature into a common law. Medieval historian Richard Barber, all right, described it as the watershed between a primary oral culture and a world where writing was paramount. Common law is a body of law identified by judges, which is called predators, and judicial proceedings, also called sterdices, rather than created by the legislature. Judges determine the common law by pinpointing the legal principles consistently reiterating in previous legal cases over a long period of time. In English law, time immemorial ends in a legal memory begins at 1189, the end of the reign of King Henry II, who is associated with the invention of the common law. Did everyone hear that? So whatever your perception of what you call time immemorial in reference to your history from an abstract understanding, from the legal understanding, it says that the English law referring to time immemorial ends and legal memory begins at 1189 and the end of reign of King Henry III, who is associated with the invention of the English common law. So time immemorial in reference to the common law starts with King Henry II descendants, which is Richard I, John, and Henry III. Because King Henry II of England. His father is Godfrey the Fifth kind of man Jew, where my surname Jefferson descend down from. We're not even talking about Jefferson. We're talking about the given name Clifford, all right, which we're going to go back to now. He said the name Clifford originated in where? Herefordshire. History of Hereford, history of Herefordshire. Hereford became the seat of Puta Bishop of Hereford sometime between 676 and 688 AD. After which the settlement continued to grow due to its proximity to the border between Mercia and Wales, becoming the Saxon capital of West Mercia by the beginning of the 8th century. Hostility between the Anglo-Saxons and the Welsh came to a head with the Battle of Hereford in 760, in which the Britons freed themselves from the influence of the English. Hereford was again targeted by the Welsh during their conflict with the Anglo-Saxon King Edward the Confessor in 1056, when supported by Viking allies Guthred ap Llywelyn, King of Gwyn and Pole, marched on the town and put it to the torch before returning home in triumph. Hereford had the only mint west of Severn in the reign of Ascertain, the grandson of King Alfred the Great, and it was Hereford, then a border town, that Ascertain summoned the leading Welsh princes. Hereford was home to a small but relatively important Jewish community until 1290, when Jews were expelled from England by Edward I. Jews from Worcester and Gloucester moved to Herefordshire after their expulsion in January 1275 by the Queen Mother Eleanor Province. The Bishop of Hereford campaigned against the presence of the community, including Cantaloupe and Richard Springfield, who tried to stop social contact between the Christians and the Jews. So that means that the Anglo-Saxons, by way of the conversion to Christianity in the 6th century, were now deemed the Christians, not the Christians associated with the Scottish, who the Scottish descendants, and the Scottish descendants are aligned with the Frankish descendants, and the Frankish descendants are aligned with those through what we call the Old Alliance, which brings all of them into one big family. All right, they bring them all to one big family, and this is the reason why they were expelled from England, because the Ashkenazi Jews who, do the Jewish diaspora, immigrated to England in the 10th century with William the Conqueror, 11th century with William the Conqueror in 1066, then were expelled, not just in 1275 by Eleanor Province, the wife of King Henry III, but by King Henry III's son, Edward I, in 1290. Okay? These are undiluted facts, all because of the Exchequer. All right? Here's your sources, anyone looking for them. So we see that there was not just the expulsion in 1290, but there was exposed before that in 1275. In Herefordshire, where my surname come from. Okay? Where my surname come from. Very important for you to understand it. Let's move forward. Let's go back to what we talked about yesterday. Thank you, Sniper. This is back to Hereford Mapamunda, because my name Clifford comes from Herefordshire. And Herefordshire is where the Jews took up residence in 1275 until they were expelled in 1275, and they also were expelled in 1290. All right. we also see that prior to these explosions in 1275 to 1290, they came into England in 1066 with William the Conqueror. Okay? They came into England with William the Conqueror. It wasn't even called Great Britain there. Great Britain then. All right? So it's very important because we understand that the T and O map, which we talked about yesterday, was also called the Hereford or Mapamunda. All right? The Hereford Mapamunda, which was found in Hereford Castle, all right, in Herefordshire. So before we deal with the Hereford Mapamunda, all right, which is called the T&O map, let's go to the T&O map just to get a reference there again, okay? T&O map. The T&O map was created in the 7th century by Isidore of Seville, right? From Spain, all right? And if you say Spain, then that's automatically associated with what we call Europe, okay? With some parts of Asia, all right? Because we're looking at the T&O map, and we know the T&O map is represented by the sons of Noah, okay? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We know that the Ashkenazi Jews or the Scottish Jews, which migrated from the Jewish diaspora into Scotland in the 18th century, which became the Scottish Enlightenment, which caused the Scottish diaspora to what we call here North America. All right? And we know through the Scottish diaspora that what they learned in their institutions that they created for their efficiency, you know what I'm saying, was based upon what they said in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, which was found in Edinburgh, Scotland, where they migrated to as Ashkenazi Jews. And they clearly said that the Berber tribes, which were found in not just in Europe, but in North Africa, were the founders uh, were the founders of the government that was functioning under what they call Wittenmont and function under what's called the uncoded law called the Magna Carta. All right? Well, I got it here because I know I constantly stayed on that yesterday. I don't want to keep repeating. No, I'm having. Everyone can go to the last video I did to see that. So the T&O map, also known as Isidorian map, is a map found in the 7th century. All right? And you know that the T itself is a letter, the capital T inside of what we call a spear. Okay? The capital T inside of a spear. Now watch this. I I I I I found this out today just talking to Brother Burkett on the phone. You better get your pen and pad. Check this out. This is really fun. Majority of our brothers and sisters are dead. They're dead. Trying to find this picture. Hold on. Gotta do this, y'all. Hold on for 1 second. Can't do it with the computer. I know what I'm talking about. This is gonna blow y'all mind. I hope y'all ready for this. Y'all ready for this? I see that. This is King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay. We're talking about the T and O map. All right. We're talking about the T and O map. We also talking about the Exchequer. The Exchequer, you see him standing on the Exchequer board, right? You know, Exchequer is a current account. All right. This is our Jesus Christ, who I'm the reincarnation of. All right. He was called King Edgar the Peaceful. The word Jefferson means peaceful place. All right. The word Jefferson means peaceful place. All right. So instead of saying King Edgar the Peaceful, King Edgar Jefferson is just King Edgar the Peaceful, which is the same thing. All right. You see him carrying the scepter. You see him carrying the crucifix globus with the cross on it. All right. A crucifix globus and a cross on it. All right. Very important you understand that. All right. Everybody keep this image on their head. And this is in Oxford Chapel. All right. He's standing on the checkerboard. This goes back here. You know, man. Geno Mac. All right. And you see King Edgar or Jesus Christ holding a globe, right? We know you got the capital T, and you got we got the lowercase t. All right. The capital T represents the Father, and the lowercase t represents the Son. I repeat, the capital T represents the Father, and the lowercase t represents the Son. All right. We know the Father created man in his image, in his likeness. He created thee. All right? These were the gods made in the image of the creator God, which in medieval times they were called Lord God or lords. All right? They were called lords at that particular time. These were your angel or your messenger. All right? The word angel, English, angelo, all means messenger. All right? And we see that the globe or the sphere of the world is being held by that angel, which was King Edgar the Peaceful. He represents the station of the Lord on earth, because the word Lord on earth is spelled Geofrey. Geo means oath, earth, and frey means Lord or freer. Or you can spell it Godfrey, which means Lord, frey, and God means God. All right? If you want to play the etymology game. If you want to play the etymology game. We don't want to play the etymology game with George Seville. We're not going to do that. So as we can show you that this new game that was created by the Ashkenazi Jews or the Scottish Jews, because the one who wrote the story about Shem, Ham, and Japheth were the ones who wrote the biblical story, which were the monarchs of Great Britain, such as King James on down. All right? And we know that King James from Scotland, which were the residents of Scotland, were the ones who were associated with what we call British Israelism. And so if you associate British Israelism, then you have to associate it with British Jews. And British Jews are called Scottish Jews, and Scottish Jews are the Ashkenazi Jews who migrated to Edinburgh in the 18th century. And then they have got their Scottish Enlightenment and then took it around the world, which is why we're in the situation we're in today. Because Dred Scott case said slavery was brought over to the colonies by Great Britain, okay? By Great Britain. So if we look on the globe or the sphere, such as a TNO map, you see Asia, which is symbolic of the Arabs. You see Europe, which is symbolic of what we call Japheth. And Japheth was the father of Gomar, whose son was Ashkenaz, which where the Ashkenazi Jews come from. Because we know that when you look at the T is separated by what we call the Mediterranean Sea, all right? Which separates Europe from Africa, all right? It separates Europe from Africa. And we know that the Libyan Berbers were the ones who were considered, based off the Encyclopedia Britannica 1911, to be the ones who followed and created what they call Witten. And Witten is associated with the Anglo-Saxon, and we now know that these Anglo-Saxons was Berbers because there is no calendar for the English king until 1066, where those Jews come to England in 1066. All right, how we knew that? Let's go back to what we call the Mapamunda in Herefordshire, where my first name comes from. Right? Because let me just clear this point up. We can see the higher case inside the cross. You know, the big T represents God, and the lower T represents Jesus Christ. All right, represents the Son. All right, we know that God's Son was crucified. All right, we know God's Son was crucified on the lowercase cross. All right, and we know as they said, John said the Jews crucified Jesus. All right, they said the Jews crucified our Jesus Christ. All right, so we see King Edgar the Peaceful. Now we see King Edgar the Peaceful, which is our Jesus Christ, carrying the spirit of the crucifer globus with an extension of a cross on top of it, which is the lowercase cross, all right, which is symbolic of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, all right? Because, you know, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ was a story told by what we call the Crusaders, all right? The Crusaders do what we call the style of turning, going up to, the crown of thorns, all the way up to the stride of turning. And we know the crown of thorns is symbolic of the crucifixion of Jesus, all right? And we know that this story is told by the holy, what we call the kingdom of Jerusalem, going back to Godfrey of Bouillon, which stated that he didn't want to wear a crown on his head because of the crucifixion of Jesus, all right? Because he was crucified with a crown of thorns. And we know that Louis IX was in possession of both relics, the Shroud of Turin and the crown of thorns, or knew somebody associated with the crown of Turin or the Shroud of Turin, or the crown of thorns. And this was the reason for the first, all the way to the Ninth Crusade, because the first and the Ninth Crusade was concerning Jews and Arabs, all right, who invaded Berber territory, all right, which was continental. It was what we call universal, cosmopolitan relationship around the world. Let's prove it. All right, so we see the lowercase c on top of the globe, which is symbolic of the resurrection of King Edgar the Peaceful. All right, but his DNA, the Holy Grail, the bloodline is still here on Earth. All right, which is inside the globe. All right, which takes you back to the TNO map. We know the TNO map represents in the 6th, 7th century Asia, Europe, and Africa. All right. It said nothing about the Anglo-Sphere. We know the Anglo-Sphere is associated with North America. We know the English overseas possession is associated with North America. All the possessions by Great Britain and French were territories that were in conflict when they were ruled by England. All right. Yes, the territories that were usurped by the Frankish kings, the Scottish kings, and the Muslim kings were territories belonging to the Anglo-Saxon Berber. All right. Let's prove it. Actually, the Mapamunda. My first given name was found. Here from Mapamunda, we know the Jews were expelled in 1275 by Eleanor of Provence, the wife of Henry III, the father of Edward I, who expelled them in 1290. Okay, so we got two expulsions. The here from Mapamunda, or called Mapamunda, is the largest medieval map still known to exist, depicting the known world. It is a religious rather than literal depiction, all right, featuring heaven, hell, and the path to salvation. The map is drawn in a form deriving from the TNO pattern dating from the circa of 1300. At this time, King Edward I is living, all right, King of England. It's displayed at the Hereford Cathedral in where? In Herefordshire, England, where my surname comes from. My given name comes from. The map was created with the intent of it being appreciated as an intricate work of art rather than as a navigational tool. Sources for the information presented on the map include the Alexandrian tradition of medieval bestiaries, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, and monstrous racist traditions as well as in the Bible. We just talked about that. All right. Monstrous is when you get all the depictions of deers and the golden calves and eagles. All this is based upon bestiaries, if I'm pronouncing that right. Although the evidence is circumstantial, modern scholars link the map with the promotion of a coat of Thomas de Canteloup and with the justification of the expulsion of Jewry from England. Potentially anti-Semitic images included a horned Moses, you hear that? A horned Moses, and a depiction of Jews worshiping the golden calf in the form of a Saracen devil. The map also seems to reflect very patriarchal views of women as inherently sinful, including figures such as the wife of Lot being turned to a pillar of salt for gazing at the city of Sodom. Canteloup was known for his dislikes of Jews and was regarded as a misogynistic even by the standard of his own life. Further. Poetry formation history. The Hereford Mappamunde hung with little regard for many years on the walls of the choir aisle in the cathedral. During the troubled times of the Commonwealth, the map had been laid beneath the floor of Bishop Audley's Chancery, where it remained secret for some time. In 1855, it was cleaned and repaired at the British Museum during the Second World War for safety reasons. The Mapamunda and other valuable manuscripts from Hereford Cathedral Library were kept elsewhere and returned to the collection in 1946. Right? Presentation presentation of the Jews in the Exodus itinerary. Also see history of the Jews in England, 1066 to 1290, after the first of the explosion. We know it's associated with the history of the Jews in England in 1066 and in 1290. We know that before they were expelled in 1290, they were expelled in 1275 by Eleanor Province, the wife of Henry III, the son of Henry II, the son of Godfrey the Fifth, kind of man Jew, the son of Fulk, the ruler of Jerusalem. And Fulk the Fifth, the ruler of Jerusalem, was ruling in Jerusalem when Jerusalem came to its height. This is due to the first, second, and third crusade. You know, the first ruler of the kingdom of Jerusalem was Godfrey of Bouillon, and he was a Frankish king. Baldwin the First was a Frankish king. Baldwin the Second was a Frankish king until it was was taken back by the French king who was ruling the kingdom of England by way of their alliance with the Counts of Anjou and the kings of Wessex. All right, very important for you to understand that. If you don't, you will be lost in the sauce. What is bestiary, if I'm pronouncing that right? Bestiary is a compendium of beasts originated in the ancient world. Bestiaries were made popular in the Middle Ages in illustrated volumes that describe various animals and even rocks. The natural history and illustration of each beast was usually accompanied by moral lessons. This reflected the belief that the world itself was the word of God and that every living thing had its own special meaning. For example, the pelican, which was believed to tear up its breast to bring the young to life with its own blood, was a life living representative of Jesus. Thus, the bestiary is also a reference to symbolic language of animal and Western Christian art and literature. Following this physical locus, Saint Isidore Seville of the father of etymology and Saint Ambrosius expanded the religious message with reference to passages from the Bible and the Septuagint. They and other authors freely expanded or modified pre-existing models, constantly refining the moral content without entering or access to much more details regarding the factual content. Nevertheless, the often fanciful accounts of the beasts were widely read and generally believed to be true. A few observations found in the bestiary, such as the migration of birds, were discounted by natural philosophers of later centuries only to be rediscovered in modern scientific eras. Last point on this one. Medieval bestiaries are remarkable, similar in sequence of the animals of which they treat. Bestiaries were particularly popular in England and France around the 12th century and were mainly compilations of earlier texts. The Aberdeen bestiary is one of the best known of the 50 manuscripts bestiaries surviving today. All right, so enough about that. Let's go backtrack a little bit. You have the Jews to Scotland, just backtracking what we discussed in the past lessons, so that the new brother who came on will be on the same page with us, on the same frequency. History of the Jews in Scotland. Try to hold that thought. All right. Also, one needs to note that when they say exchequer, and exchequer means carrying account, they're not normal. They're not all the time talking about actual money. When they say carrying account, that word means the actual record of the accounts or events that took place. So when we use that word carrying account and look at the exchequer, they were using gold and silver back then. So they're not talking about money. When they say current account, they're talking about the current events, all right, that took place, which we're reading now. The history of the Ashkenazi Jews began in the 17th century, or goes back to at least the 17th century, and is not known when the Jews first arrived in Scotland, with the earliest concrete historical references to the Jewish presence in Scotland being the late 17th century. So when we talk about exchequer, a current account, this is the record or the current account in which they're talking about. All right. In the 18th century, which is not that far off, most Scottish Jews today are Ashkenazi Jews background who mainly settle in Edinburgh. So when you settle in Edinburgh, that's a diaspora, which means a migration or an immigration from somewhere that you came from. All right. And we know that if you call or related to the Ashkenazi Jews, then that means that your history goes back to the Jewish diaspora and you immigrated from the Holy Land. And the reason why you were ran from the Holy Land is a result of what came about and what we call the Crusade. That was the reason why the Crusade even took place. All right, we must understand. Like the brother Sniper said, yeah, this is fire. So the Ashkenazi Jews or the Scottish Jews in Scotland originated with the diaspora of the Ashkenazi Jews from the Jewish diaspora in the Holy Land. The reason why they migrated to Edinburgh was a result of the anti-Semitic or the anti-Jewish riots in England. All right, there's only there's only scanty evidence of Jewish presence in the medieval Scotland. In 1180, the Bishop of Glasgow forbade churchmen to lease their benefices for money borrowed from Jews. This was around the time of anti-Jewish riots in England. And so it is possible that Jews may have arrived in Scotland as refugees, or it may refer to Jewish domiciles in England from whom Scots were borrowing money. Okay? So Scots, Jews domiciled in England where Scots were borrowing money from. Okay? Which is what they call Scottish Jews, which brings them what we call money lenders. Violation of antitrust law. Okay? So the Scottish Jews are the Ashkenazi Jews who migrated to Scotland as refugees as a result of what took place in of the anti-Semitic rivalries in England, which still involved the Ashkenazi Jews. All right, they're the same. Let's go to the history prior to their arrival in Scotland. Sorry about that. Couldn't get my coffee on the right temperature. Good man. History of the Jews in England. We already did with the history of the Jews in Scotland, which originated in the 18th century. We know that the Enlightenment came in the 18th century, as we've seen in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, that came from Edinburgh, all right, where they migrated to or immigrated to, in which they came to their Scottish Enlightenment, which caused the Scottish diaspora to what we call these territories here, right? Thank you. Appreciate it. History of the Jews in England. The history of the Jews in England goes back to the reign of William the Conqueror, although it is likely that there had been some Jewish presence in the Roman period. So they take the immigration or the migration to the Isles of what we call Albion, or what we call England, with William the Conqueror, goes back to the Jewish presence in the Roman period, which automatically associated with the Ashkenazi Jews. All right. There is no definite evidence and no reason to support that there were any communities during Anglo-Saxon time. The first written record of Jewish settlement in England dates from 1070, the Jewish settlement, which continued until King Edward I of the Plantagenet crown edited expulsion of 1290. Okay? These are facts. So let's go to the history of the Jews in England before 1290, all right? Or before 1275 to see how we get to this position, all right? I'm going to be jumping. After the expulsion, there was no overt Jewish community as opposed to individual practice of Judaism secretly until the rule of Oliver Cromwell. While Cromwell never officially readmitted Jews to the Commonwealth of England, a small colony of Sephardic Jews living in London was identified in 1656 and allowed to remain. So we know under the English Commonwealth, we started from 1649, all right, to 1660. We know 1660 is when Oliver Charles II was restored to the crown, but still was under what they call English Commonwealth, which you now call a republic. There was no crown because they know under the Parliament of Great Britain and from the Treaty of Union in 1707, they usurped the crown power and they took away the position and title of the crown in lieu of the intel estate because other people were occupying now by way of immigration or migration that came about through the allowance of those ancestors of those Scottish Jews who are descendants of the Ashkenazi Jews to migrate here. All right, that's why you see that the alliances between America and Europe, i.e., Egypt, I'm sorry, Israel, are strong. Not just in Israel, but in the UK as well. Their relationship is strong. We're going to discuss that as well. Slow down. Ain't even got to go into Rome because we know on one side of the wall you had the Londinium, and the other side of the wall you had London Wick. London Wick was those ancestors descended down from the kings of Kent, the kings of Wessex, on down to the Plantagenet crown as a result of marriages and alliances, versus those are who descended down from the Danish Northmen Vikings associated with Harold Godwinson, uh, King Ofer, King Odo, etc. All right, all these times and eras are very important according to the calendar. All right, that we're using to expose these troops. All right, so we don't need to go into Roman Britain and Anglo-Saxon England because that'll take you into the time dealing with King Ethelbert. We know King Ethelbert of Kent codes of laws were incorporated just like, and these are Wessex laws, just like the what we call the Mosaic Code through Alfred Dune's book. All right, Alfred Dune's book was the law of judgment. All right, we talked about that. I don't have time to go through it today. So we speak on the 1666. I don't know what you mean by 1666. I said from 1649 to 1660, which came up under the restoration of the crown of Charles II. which was still still on the Commonwealth, which they now call Republic, because under the statutory law of New Jersey, Statute 46:3-1 and 2, that all land is still allodial because all the feudal kingdoms that were given out to the proprietary, such as George Carteret and John Berkeley, were surrendered back to the crown in 1702. Okay, so there's really no need to speak about 1666. All right, that's just a different timeline, because under the Bourbon timeline, we know, as we reviewed my last lesson from yesterday, we know that 753 in the Gregorian year is actually 1703 in the Bourbon year, which is ruling at the time of the British monarch Queen Anne. All right, I don't got time to go back through that. If you want to solidify that, please go back and watch that last video. So I got to move on. We ain't going dealing with Rome, because we know in Rome, this goes in the time of Kings of Kent and the Kings of Wessex, ended with Ethelbert and started with Alfred the Great. Okay? Thank you for understanding. We know that the Jews go back to Rome, Ashkenazi Jews. Now they're up in the 10th, the 11th century, because we can't start from time immemorial, all right, in an abstract way, because you can never prove it, time out of mind. So we have to look at time immemorial from a concrete perspective, which start from Richard I, 1189, okay? We ain't even in 1189, we in 1066, all right? When the Jews come in, we're waiting to conquer, because we're reading it now. History of the Jews in England in 1066, when you get your first English reading out year. Prior to 1065 is the Berber reading out year, okay? Which means they were Berber kings. William of Malmesbury stated that William the Conqueror brought Jews from Rohan to England during the Norman Conquest. Norman Conquest is invasion. William the Conqueror's object may be inferred. His policy was to get feudal dues paid to the royal treasury, Exchequer, in coins rather than in kind. And for this purpose, it was necessary to have a body of men scattered through the country who would supply quantities of coins. Well said. Here are Thor. Prior to the expulsion of the Jews in 1290, the status of the Jews in England was completely dependent on the will of the crown. We know what the crown is. We know the crown is a corporation, so we know the king personifies the crown, because all land that's intel is called crown land, and you cannot separate it from the crown because it's personified by the crown by way of what we call the office of the corporation. So contrast to that of an aggregate, which is made of many individuals, which are nothing more than legal persons, right? Prior to the expulsion of 1290, the status of the Jews in England was completely dependent on the will of the crown, which represents the monarch, because the monarch represents the crown based off him occupying that office, which is called the corporation soul. English Jews were legally under the jurisdiction of the king, who offered them protection in return for their economic functions. You got to remember what king we're talking about in 1290 and in 1066, all right? These are not Anglo-Saxon Berber kings. They are Vikings sitting on the English throne, acting in the capacity as the English king. That's why they're honoring the laws that were passed down from written and the uncoded Magna Carta, going back to the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, which were adopted by those English kings, such as William the Conqueror and everybody who came after that. All right, I'm back. As a royal serf, they were all allowed freedom of the King's Highway. Matter of fact, Route 27 in New Brunswick, New Jersey is called the King's Highway. Exemption from tolls, the ability to hold land directly from the king, and physically protection and vast network of royal castles built to assert Norman authority. Okay? Simply time. Take your time, you can go in and update yourself on your own. Right? English Jews experienced a golden age of sort under Henry II, Godfrey V, son of Godfrey V, Canal and Banking Co, son of Pope, ruler of Jerusalem. And the Jews were received protection from Henry II, son of Godfrey the fifth Caliban Jew, ruled of Jerusalem. So that means that Godfrey the fifth Caliban Jew was ruling Jerusalem around this time. Okay? This is the time of what we call the Crusades. All right? And if he wasn't ruling, that means his heirs were ruling. All right? English Jews experienced a golden age of sort under Henry II and the 12th century. That means the 1100 AD sometime. Simply due to a huge economic expansion and increased demand for credit. All right? We know credit goes back into those current accounts. All right? You know, when you receive a check, that instrument denotes to a credit. All right? Which is still actually debt. All right? Until you redeem it, because it's payment, it's for payment on demand for gold and silver. But because you're getting what we call fiat or paper currency, then that means that there must be a trust account set up and result of what they call that debt. Because all debt is what we call crown debt. All right. Major Jewish fortunes were made in London, Oxford, Lincoln, Bristol, and Northwich. All you got to do is listen, brother. That's all you got to do is listen with attention. Apparently, you are paying attention if you're responding like you're doing. All right. The crown, in turn, capitalized on the prosperity of its Jews. All right. So the Jews were property of the crown. We heard that in Dred Scott's case, which we read yesterday. If we turn our attention towards the Dark Ages, it will be the white people instead of the people of color that were enslaved. Okay. Go watch yesterday's lesson if you didn't catch that. Dred Scott case, and Dred Scott last name happened to be Dred Scott, right? Which was a slave. You would consider property, right? When he tried to run away from slavery to another state, they took him back. That was incorporated in the colonies, which was instituted by Great Britain going back to 1707, which was qualified by Chief Justice Taney in the Dred Scott case. This is the reason why, as I stated in previous lectures, that Frederick Douglass, the first recorder of deeds, all right, for the United States, not the first, actually it was the third, all right? They had two Germans there before him, making a mockery of him because he knew that his paternity was of Anglo-Saxon paternity, all right? Even though under the status of his mom being substitute Part 2 Secretary Beatrice, all right? So as we can see, the crown in turn capitalized on the prosperity of its Jews. In addition to many arbitrary taxes, Richard I, 1189, i.e. time immemorial, established the ordinance of the jury in 1194, and they attempt to organize the Jewish community. This looked like God to them. It ensured that mandatory records will be kept, i.e. a current record, i.e. a current account, i.e. Exchequer. All right? Exchequer. And to show that the mandatory records will be kept by royal officials, it would be your chancellor. For all Jewish transactions, every debt was recorded on a chirography to allow the king's immediate and complete access to Jewish property. Hear that? Jewish property. Richard also established a special exchequer to collect any unpaid debts due after the death of a Jewish creditor. All right? It's called Crown Debt. Crown Debt Act. I forgot what year that was, and it was passed by a British minor, Charles II, if I'm not mistaken. The establishment of the Exchequer of the Jews, which is called Court of Exchequer, eventually made all transactions of English Jewry liable to taxation by the king, in addition to a 10% of all sums recovered by the Jews with the help of the English court, i.e. Court of Exchequer. Yes, sir. So while the First and Second Crusades increased anti-Jewish sentiments, Jews in England went relatively unscathed beyond occasional fines and special levies. Though they did not experience the same kind of social mobility and cultural advancement that Jews under Muslim rule did. The Jews of England population and prosperity increased under the protection of the king. Tell all those Hebrew Israelites that they're misled. The status of the Jews in England dramatically worsened with the consolidation of the governmental authority, as well as depending on popular piety in the late 12th century, further isolating Jews from the greater English community. All right, let's move further down. We're dealing with Richard I, the son of Henry II, the son of Godfrey, the fifth Caliban Jew, the son of Folk, the ruler of Jerusalem. All that thought. I got my mom called. You return my call? I'm letting you know that about my ticket. Be there from the second. I'm supposed to take today, and he's going to try to do the same thing. Right, how about that, y'all? Thank you, thank you. Love the compliment. Keep them coming. The man says as I talk, he sees the real life what's going on today. That's funny. I like that. I'm giving you a view outside of the globe instead of being inside the globe, right? So we see here. So English Jews experience a golden age. Yes, sir. Only one way. You can only go backwards or forward. You know what I'm saying? Now there's a fork in the road. You know what I'm saying? We at a fork in the road. You know what I'm saying? You've been walking up from the time you've been building this channel, you've been running into forks in the road. All right? You've been running into forks in the road. Now you forced with a decision of which road to take. All right? Which way to take. You know what I'm saying? And what makes it so beautiful that you ain't got to go back to them and ask for instruction. Because your determination on which path you take is based off the instructions that are given from the road that you take, which is based off memory, the past. Because you can't get to the future from the present, but based from the past. That's why I say, he who writes your books sets your timeline. The book is called the current account, or what we call, what it say, a current account. all right? A current account, something that's current, events that can lead you back to that account that the physical body can't go through. That's why we call it autobiological memory. Taking your conscious mind to a time and era where your physical body can't go. And then once you take your conscious mind to a time and era where your physical body can't go, once you come back from that time and era where your physical body can't go, you can take something that's in this physical where your physical body is to qualify it. That's fire right there. No one else can do that. But you need a calendar. English Jews experienced a golden age of sort under Henry II. I wonder why. Because he was the son of Jefferson. All right? He was the son of Godfrey, the fifth kind of man Jew, who was ruling Jerusalem at this time. He said English Jews experienced a golden age of sort of under Henry II in the late and 12th century due to the huge economic expansion, increased demand for credit. Major Jewish fortunes were made in London, Oxford, Lincoln, Bristol, and Northwich. The crown in return capitalized on the prosperity of its Jews. In addition to the many arbitrary taxes, which is the first established the ordinance of the jury in 1194, in an attempt to organize the Jewish community. It ensured that mandatory records will be kept by royal officials for all Jewish transactions. Every debt was recorded on the chirography to allow the king's immediate complete access to the Jewish property. Richard also established a special exchequer to collect any unpaid debt due after the death of a Jewish creditor. The establishment of the exchequer of Jews eventually made all transactions of English Jewry liable to taxation by the king, in addition to 10% of sums recovered by Jews with the help of the English court. So while the first, second crusade and the anti-Jewish sentiments, Jews in England went relatively unscathed beyond occasional fines and special levies. Though they did not experience the same kind of social nobility and cultural advancement that Jews under Muslim rules did, the Jews of England population and prosperity increased under the protection of the king. Or dealing with the Jews in England, not Scotland. Right, Scotland is that fork in the road. I like that. What's that? Catch on real quick. Right here. In 1269, Henry III made blasphemy by Jews a hanging offense, and whenever returned from the crusade, he passed the Statute of Jewry in 1275. Remember, that's when they were expelled from Herefordshire, all right? And because that's where my name comes from, Herefordshire, all right? And it said they were expelled in 1275 outside of the expulsion, they expelled their expulsion in 1290. That didn't even got here yet. It said the number of Jews were around 2/3, two, well, how do you pronounce it? 2/3 of 1,000 in England by 1270. They they were much less capable of generating income for the crown, as they had been overtaxed and their capital was was much eroded. Overtaxation invariably led to overdue debt being foreclosed, meaning the lands of the middling knights and gentry being bought up by the biggest landowners, notoriously included Queen Eleanor and other members of the court. This process had fueled anti-Semitism among the forces opposing the crown centered around Simon de Montfort during Henry III's time. During the Second Brand War in 1260, de Montfort forces led a series of pogroms in many English cities where Jewish communities were attacked and debt records captured and destroyed. This is dealing with the Oxford provision, all right, where my surname Jefferson was found in. Oxford provisions by Fitzjohn Godfrey Fitzjohn. All right, you can look it up on the house of name. Thank you, brother. Common sense. I'm gonna show you how much common sense that people ain't got. During the Edward the First reign, anti-Semitism moved from being used by opponents of the crown to being deliberately deployed and developed in the interest of the English state. While financial considerations may have played a part in his actions leading to the expulsion of the Jews in 1290, it is important to note Edward's sincere religious bigotry. Shortly after returning for the Crusades, in order to assuage concern among the landing class within the parliament, he passed the statute of Jewry in 1275. Okay? He passed the statute of Jewry in 1275. Before we go there, I'm going to go to a certain point here. Oh, here we go. Yeah. To finance his war against Wales in 1276, Edward I of England taxed Jewish moneylenders. When the moneylenders could no longer pay the tax, they were accused of disloyalty. Already restricted to a limited number of occasions, Edward abolished their privilege to lend money, restricted their movements and activities, and forced Jews to wear a yellow patch. Remember, this is when you get into wildcat banking, right? When you deal with wildcat banking, you have to be able to back your payments. This is where the federal deposit insurance company comes in. What is it called? What's it called? When you go into the bank, you see that big thing right at the window, federal deposit insurance. They have to insure uh, 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 what it is that they're claiming uh, uh, to insure, which is the federal notes that was created through Wildcat Bank. All right, through Wildcat Bank. On September 20th, 1728, the heads of the household of the Jews of England, believed to have numbered around 600 out of the population of 2/3 of 1,000, and were arrested on suspicion of coin clipping and counterfeiting, and Jewish homes in England were searched. At the time, coin clipping was a widespread practice which both Jews and Christians were involved in. A financial crisis had resulted in pressures to the act against coin clippers. In 1275, coin clipping was made a capital offense, and in 1278, raids on suspect of coin clippers were carried out. You hear that, y'all? You hear that? It need to be done today, and it will be done today, right? Let's go to my point I want to make. Isn't it? I do this from my computer. Under John 1205, we know John was the one who wrote the Magna Carta, and we know that John was the son of Henry II, son of Godfrey, the fifth Canavan Jew, son of Folk, the ruler of Jerusalem. As early as 1198, Pope Innocent III had written to all Christian princes, including Richard of England, where the word or the term concept of time immemorial comes from, calling upon them to compel the remission of all usury demanded by Jews from Christians. This would render the Jewish community very existence impossible. On the 15th of July, 1205, the Pope laid down the principle that Jews were doomed to perpetual servitude because they crucified Jesus. All right. In England, the secular power soon followed the initiative of the church. John, having become indebted to the Jewish community while in Ireland, at first treated Jews with a show of forbearance. He confirmed the charter of Rabbi Josh and his sons and made it apply to all Jews of England. He wrote a sharp remonstrance to the mayor of London against the attacks that were continually being made upon the Jews of the city, alone of all the cities of England. He reappointed a Jacob archpriest of all the English Jews in the 12th of July, 1199. So Pope made a decree that the Jews were the ones who crucified Jesus Christ. All right? Crucified Jesus Christ. What is symbolic relic for Jesus Christ and the resurrection of Jesus Christ? It's the cross. All right? It is the cross. Let's go back to the image of King Edgar the Peaceful. All right? See the cross on top of the globe. You don't see the, which is the symbolic of the lowercase t. All right? It can either be this or the Latin T, lowercase t, all right, which makes the what's east and west a little bit higher, okay? The capital T is symbolic of the T and O map, and the T and O map is symbolic of the three sons of Noah. And we know the one who writes your books tells your story. It ain't the Arabs tell the story according to what they want their descendants to believe in. The Egyptians tell their story according to what they want their descendants to believe in. But we know that according to the T and O map, there ain't no Egyptians. They're Libyan Berbers. We know that Arabs are trying to act as if they're Berbers, and we know that Jews are trying to act like they're Berbers as well, because we know that Jaspis, which represents the third part of the TNO map, is symbolic of Europe. And we know Europe is symbolic of the Europe continent. So let's go back to TNO map. Because we can see King Edward the Peaceful standing on the Exchequer. All right? The Exchequer is the current record. The current record going back to this individual's time, which was the king or the Christ or the corporation of soul. Look up what we call the English, what you call the new minister's chart. Okay, it's called the new minister's chart. Look at it. I ain't got time to go through it today as a result for the sake of time to get this lesson across, but look at it. All right, stained glass. Where did they get this image from? And they look just like me. Where did they get that image from? All right, this is English king. Now I'm an English Anglo-Saxon bird wearing the turban. All right, this is my crown. Let's move forward. So the ordinance of the jury was in practice the beginning of the office of the Exchequer of the Jews, which made all transactions of English jury liable to taxation by the King of England. This is called free and common soakage. All right, which the United States called it encumbrance. We call it free and common soakage. Yes, where did they get the image from? I don't know. I don't know where the image came from. It's called Exchequer of the Jews. Exchequer of the Jews. The Exchequer of the Jews, we already know Exchequer means carrying account. All right. All right, which can be looked at as far as a record of finances, a record of holdings, or a record of contracts. All right, agreements. We know under the statute of frauds, all contracts must be in writing. So the Exchequer of the Jews was a division of the Court of Exchequer at Westminster. We know Westminster Abbey was created in 950 by King Edward the Peaceful under the authority of St. Dustin for the English Benedictine monastery, which was a cosmopolitan movement, all right, around the world to change from the secular clergy to the those monks who were celibate, okay? Read that. And it started with the English Benedictine reform, what they call what was it called? Clunic reform, okay? The English Benedictine reform and the Clunic reform, all right? Very important. Picture speaks 1,000 words, you're right. Jews began to settle in England soon after the Norman conquest, all right, in 1066. For the most part, they escaped the massacres during the first and the second crusade, all right? So the crusade didn't just concern the Jews, but it concerned the Arabs as well, because it dealt with Saladin, all right? Crusades, despite occasional imposition of fines and special levies, their numbers and prosperity increased under the protection of the king. There was a reason Jews were protected by the crown. Surviving records of the Exchequer pipe rolls of the reign of Henry I, son of William the Conqueror, where the Jews first came in. So William the Conqueror kept a record of all his property. All right. It says Henry I showed that the Jews of England constitute a major source of royal revenue to the crown early in the 12th century. The intent was to use the jury as a reservoir equally open to receive and closed to retain the surplus wealth of the surrounding population, so that the crown will never lack a fund on which to draw in an hour of need. That's why everybody pay tax. So when the citizens got needs, that the ones who put in place in regard to the disposition of those finances or assets which will have for the public welfare. All right? Very, very important to understand that. All right? Jews were allowed to charge you to provide tax revenues to the crown. I got my certificate right there from the state of New Jersey certificate of authority to collect sales tax. I got the authority to do so. The authority doesn't have to come from the state of New Jersey, but that certificate up there recognized my authority. Okay? It recognized my authority. The State Department of Treasury stated that. I mean, the state of New Jersey certificate of authority to collect taxes, state and sales tax, all right? Under the crown, not as a corporation, totally different. Everybody get that privilege. Why? Because it denotes to usury, all right? To use something, they got to tax, all right? That's why when you rent in the car, you got to pay for the rental fee as well as other fees for the use versus it being your own. You ain't got to pay those fees. All right. Move forward. The first special exchequer current account appears to have been created to manage a large estate left by Aaron of Lincoln, which needed a treasurer and a clerk to look after it. This is called the Recorder of Deeds. All right? The Recorder of Deeds. Glad you understand what I'm saying. All right? So the Recorder of Deeds is the one who records, act as a escrow agent or a stakeholder to confirm a conveyance between a grantor and a grantee. That means that you can either do it three ways: a lawyer, a title insurance company, the clerk, or a notary. All right, a public notary. But those ways are based upon fee simple conveyances, based upon subimputation, which was a violation of the laws that established by Edward I under Queen Inferior. It said you can sell N.J.L estate. It is supposed to pass by operation of law. All right? Not laws dealing with escheatment, not laws dealing with eminent domain, but laws dealing with transfer of estate, which are subject to what we call reversion and remanderment. This is why when the property is foreclosed on, or when somebody put a list pension on it, that means there's a cloudy title. When you see Jesus come out with his estate, there wasn't no clouds in the sky. He said he broke through the clouds. He was coming through the clouds. All right? Very important to understand what's being said. I'm taking the abstract and making it concrete. All right, so we're dealing with Exchequer of Jews, which is governed by the Court of Exchequer. So let's look up the Court of Exchequer, which is called the Exchequer of Pleas. Follow the rabbit hole, y'all. The Exchequer of Pleas, or Court of Exchequer, or Court of Common Accounts, was a court that dealt with matters of equity, a set of legal principles based on natural and common law of England and Wales. I'm glad you get this information, because when it's foreclosed on, that means it's subject to the eminent domain power of the state. And that's only because the state takes it. I don't care what state it is, because they assume that it's interstate. All right, interstate means it's abandoned. It is streets as of interstate, meaning that there ain't no heirs. So therefore, if there ain't no heirs, then it's just abandoned, which is because what they call bona vacatina. When it's abandoned, then it comes up under the eminent domain power of the state, what they call escheatment. All right, when it is streets to the priority or the prerogative of the one who has authority to look over lost property. Right? Exchequer pleas or Court of Exchequer was a court that dealt with matters of equity, fairness, and set legal principles based on natural law and common law of England and Wales. Originally part of the Carew Regents, which descended down from Wittemont. Carew Regents was started with William the Conqueror. All right. Wittemont was started with Alfred the Great, which was the Anglo-Saxon Berber, according to the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, that was created by those Ashkenazi Jews or Scottish Jews who immigrated to Edinburgh as a result of what they call the Jewish diaspora that originated from Jerusalem, where my ancestors were ruling and protecting it from that day to this present. Okay, so we see the Carew Regents or the King's Council, which is called Parliament. The Exchequer please split from the Carew in 1190 to sit as the independent central court. The Court of Chancery reputation for tardiness expenses resulted in much of its business transferring to the Exchequer. Okay, so the Court of Exchequer for the Exchequer of the Jews was called a Court of Common Pleas governed by the Courts of Chancery, because equity courts or chancery courts deal with property. All right, very important to understand. Go to Court of Common Pleas. The Court of Common Pleas or Common Bench was a common law court in English legal system that covered common pleas, actions between subject and subject, which you call a civil court. Thank you, Brother Sniper. Give me your name, brother, so I can call you by your proper surname. Court of Common Pleas or Common Bench was a common law court in English legal system that covered common pleas, actions between the subject and subject, not person and person, or citizen and citizen, subject and subject, which did not concern the king. Because if it concerned the king, then it would be headed by the king's exchequer. All right? The exchequer of pleas, because courts of common pleas are those dealing with criminal and civil matters. Matters dealing with chancery are those dealing with probate and chancery. Okay? Created in the 12th to the early 13th century after splitting from the Exchequer pleas, the Common Pleas served as one of the central English courts for around 600 years. Authorized by the Magna Carta to sit in a fixed location, the Common Pleas sat in Westminster Hall for its entire existence, joined by the Exchequer of Pleas and the courts of the King's Bench. Everybody hear that? All right. Thank you, Brother Spencer from the House of Spencer. Good to have you. The court's jurisdiction was gradually undercut by the King's Bench and Exchequer pleas with legal fictions, the Bill of Middlesex and the writ of Cornbury, respectively. We know a Bill of Middlesex is nothing but a bill dealing with trespass. So that's how they're getting us with the Bill of Middlesex. I'm happy to be located in Middlesex County, which is called Middlesex Shire. All right, where the whole thing started at, because Perth Amboy, where the crown was situated before it was subverted by New Jersey Legislative Council in 1776, it was sitting in Perth Amboy. All right, and then the way they took over the state is by creating legal fictions by what they call persons. All right, corporate persons. All right, and this how they still you, because you're not associated with a nationality or a nation's government and or religious nation government, because under this government there's a separation of church and state. All right, and if yours is affiliated with a church, the church is abstract and don't have a body of politics that has physical laws to govern those people subject to that body of politics, which we call the public welfare. Right, legal fictions, corporate fiction, i.e., aggregate contrast to a corporation sole. Because a corporation sole is a natural person, and if why would a natural person create legal fictions? Why? Why would a natural person, or natural people create laws for corporations? They are playing God. They're playing God. Thank you, brother. Suspension from the House suspension. Everybody hold that thought. Information just flows. Originally, the sole fixed court was the Curie Regis, as we know, was established by William the Conqueror. Part of that was called Wittenmont. One of the three central administrative bodies, along with the Exchequer and Chancery, from which the Court of Chancery was formed. Okay? The Court of Chancery was formed. Court of Chancery. Court of Chancery was the Court of Equity in England and Wales that followed a set of loose rules to avoid a slow pace of change and possible harshness or inequity of the common law. The Chancery had jurisdiction over all matters of equity, including trust, land law, and the state of lunatics and guardianships of infants. Do you see why I've come back? Because most of the people are considered infants, which means they're subject to the guardianship because the ones who have to be looking over them are lunatics. All right? Especially when you're talking about land law and trust law and trying to see some type of equitable remedy. You don't have a clue about what you're talking about. Its initial role difference, its initial role different somewhat as an extension of the Lord Chancellor. You hear that? The Lord Chancellor role as keeper of the king's conscience. The court was an administrative body primarily concerned with the conscientious law or natural law. Thus, the Court of Chancery had a far greater remnant than the common law court, whose decision had it had the jurisdiction to overrule for much of its existence, which was far more flexible. I see that, right? So the courts of chancery, i.e., the courts of equity, i.e., the courts of common pleas, going back to the courts of exchequer, dealing with the exchequer of the Jews, all right, which were supposed to be the Israelites, which are the Ashkenazi Jews or the Scottish Jews, and not those Berbers who learned about the two people who were controlling the current account, what they call a trust account, which they call an exchequer, which was based upon the free and common tokens that belonged to our true Lord and Savior, which was King Edgar the Peaceful, which I'm the reincarnation of in his present day. Okay? So what is King's consciousness? Keep up the King's consciousness. Keeper of the King's Conscience was a position in English judiciary before the advent of the parliamentary representative democracy. The person appears as the keeper of the King's Conscience was usually a bishop, which would be Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont, which is my Archbishop, the Third English Church of England. He was responsible for overseeing the international affairs, i.e., cosmopolitan or international or universal affairs of the monarchy, and for delivering justice on behalf of the king. Today, this position has become the Lord Chancellor during the period beginning from William the Conqueror to Henry VII of England. The person holding the keeper of the King's Conscience holds also held a high position in the church. Right? Let's get there. Let's bring this home. Before we do that. The Ashkenazi Jews who migrated to Scotland from the Jewish diaspora and then became enlightened in the 18th century, which started the Scottish diaspora, which spread around the worldwide, all right, which results in what we are subject to today, all right, which is slavery, all right, at its finest. It says the Ashkenazi Jews constitute a Jewish diaspora population that emerged in the Holy Roman Empire around the end of the first millennium. Let's go down to the etymology. We know that the Ashkenazi Jews are those who encompassed Europe because they were descendants of Gomar, who was the son of Jasper, which represents on the T&O map Europe. We know the other two persons that represent the globe based upon the T&O map was Shem, Shem, which represents Asia, and Ham, which represents Africa. And then the last one was Europe, which represents Jasper, which automatically is told to be associated with the Ashkenazi Jews. All right. But we know that those persons are inside the spear. All right. Because the cross is inside the spear. All right. And those nations, when they came into existence, must have came into existence by the creator of those nations, which happens to be God, which we call Lord. All right. Not in the abstract, but in the concrete. All right. But that only based upon whatever calendar you use. And we know that the Ashkenazi Jews, based off the concrete calendar, goes back to the time and era of the 7th century BC. The same time the 23rd and the 22nd dynasty is ruling from the Berber tribe of Libya. Okay? Very important you understand that. And we know that the Ashkenazi Jews, which inhabited Jerusalem de facto, but inhabited Scotland de facto, they all descended down from the Carolingian unification. Qualified. Sometimes early medieval periods, the Jews of Central and Eastern Europe came to be called by this term. Conforming to the custom of designating areas of Jewish settlement with biblical names, Spain was denominated to be the Sarafid in Obadiah, the 20th verse. France was called Sarafet in 1 Kings, chapter 17, verse 9. And Bohemia was called the land of Canaan. All right. By the high medieval period, the Talmudic commentator like Rashi began to use Ashkenaz to designate to Germany, earlier known as Lothar, which especially in Rhineland communities of Speyer, Worms, and Maine, the most important Jewish communities arose. Rashi uses Lashon Ashkenaz or Ashkenazi language to describe Yiddish and Byzantium and Syrian Jewish letters refer to the Crusaders as the Ashkenazim, giving a close link between the Jewish communities of France and Germany. Following the Carolingian unification, the term Ashkenaz came to refer to the Jews of both medieval Germany and France. So as we can see, the Ashkenazi Jews or the Jews from Jerusalem are associated with the Frankish Jews as a result of their affiliation with the Carolingians, which are Frankish kings. All right, very important. Carolingian is the Carolingian Empire. Charles the Simple. All right, let's get to it. All alliance. All alliance, Scots for Old Alliance, was the alliance between the Kingdom of Scotland and France against England made in 1295. They were expelled in 12. They received their independence in 1290. They were expelled in 1275 and 1295, 1296. All right, so they had an alliance with the Frankish kings. All right, because Edward the First was a French king from the Plantagenet crown, who descended down from Godfrey, who descended down from Fulk, who all descended down from Ingenleer, from the house of Ingenleer, Council of Anjou. All right, the Scouts word "old," meaning old, have become a partly affectionate term for the long-lasting association between the two countries, France and Scotland. Although the alliance was never formally revoked, it is considered to be some to have ended with the signing of the Treaty of Edinburgh in 1560. Thank you, Brother Spencer from the House of Spencer. Appreciate that. The alliance played a significant role in the relationship among Scotland, France, and England. The alliance was renewed by all of the French and Scottish monarchs of that period except Louis XI. All right, and Louis XI descended down from Louis IX and Louis X and Louis IX. And we know Louis IX signed the Treaty of Paris with the Capetan dynasty in 1259. Okay, we know that. All right, and with Edward the First descended down from. So we see that the All Alliance was an alliance between Scottish and Frankish kings. All right, let's check this out. Let's look at the alliances. The first alliance that Frankish kings had, which is called the Carolingians, was in 1777 to 800 AD. All right, 777 to 800 AD is the time of the Frankish kings. All right, the same time of the Carolingian kings, which the Ashkenazi Jews, according to Rashi, said were affiliated with the Crusaders. All right, the Crusaders, as a result of what we call the Carolingian unification, which came from the Carolingian Empire. So that brings us to the alliances that Scottish, i.e., Ashkenazi Jews were affiliated with before they even affiliated with them call themselves Scottish, because we know the Scottish Enlightenment came from the Jewish diaspora. So they weren't called Scottish there because under the British Israelites, where the Britons get their history from, goes back to the Stone of Scone. All right, the Stone of Scone. Look at the alliances. The first one, Frankish. Before we even deal with the Frankish-Scottish alliance, deal with the Frankish because the Scottish aligned with the Frankish against the English. All right, let's go to the Frankish opposite alliance. Now, Ashkenazi Jews were affiliated with the Carolingian unification, which was the Carolingian Empire, right? It says here, there was an opposite Carolingian alliance during the 8th and 9th century, affected through a series of embassies, rapprochements, and combined military operations between the Frankish Carolingian Empire and the opposite Khalifa. These are Arabs from the tribe of Shem and Frankish Jews from the tribe of Japheth. All right? They didn't mention anything about the tribe of Ham, which were the Libyans or the Berbers. All right? They ain't say nothing about them yet. Thank you, Brother Spencer from the House of Spencer. All right, so we see the first alliances with the Frankish kings and the Carolingian kings, with the Jews or Scottish Jews, or the Berber Jews, whatever you want to call them. You know what I'm saying? They got their start from the Carolingian Empire, which descended from the Merovingian Empire. This goes back to Clovis I. And we know Clovis I had a history over here in North America called the Clovis culture. How many of y'all knew that? How the hell did he get from over there to having a culture over here? Invasion. All right, let's go back out. Let's go to the next one. Franco and Mongol alliance. That's Asia. Franco-Mongol alliance. Several attempts at a Franco-Mongol alliance against the Islamic Caliphate, their common enemy, were made by various leaders among the Frankish Crusaders and the Mongol Empire in the 13th century. Everybody see that? So we meant from the 7th century to the 13th century, involving the affiliation between Arabs and now Mongols alliances with the Franks, which are the Carolingians, all right? At the time of the Crusades. Let's go back. Now we go to the Franco line, which we just read, all right? Which is a line between Scotland and France against Edward I, all right? Against Edward I. So the past two alliances with the Frankish kings, all right? All the Frankish alliance with the opposite shows that they were alliance, that they were connected together. When you look at the Tino map, you got Europe and you got Asia, all right? You got Europe, you got Asia. We know Africa or Libya is separated from the Mediterranean Sea, all right? Separated from the Mediterranean Sea. Asia is on the top half of the Tino map, and it has no boundary of water separated. That's why it's called Afro-Eurasia, okay? Where Europe is separate from it, all right? Which still doesn't include the Anglosphere, all right? So the Franco alliance was against France and Scotland, Frankish kings, not French kings from the Council of Anjou, but French kings from the Carolingians who descended down from the Robertinians under Charles de Beauce, okay? Going against Edward I, who was a Berber, all right? Going under the, assumed to be an Englishman now here because he's trying to undo what William the Conqueror did when the Jews first came in to England in 1066. All right. So we got the Franco-Scots alliance. Now look at all the other lines. I can't go through them all, but you see a Franco-Polish alliance, Franco-Hungarian alliance, Franco-Ottoman alliance. All right. That goes back to the Byzantine. All right. Franco-English alliance. When they say English, they're talking about Louis the Anglo and Spanish War. All right. When England was being ruled by de facto monarchs. 1657, that's dealing with the Oliver Cromwell. All right. Oliver Cromwell. We know the Battle of Dunbar allowed the Jews to come back into England. All right. So you got the Frankish-English alliance, Franco-Indian alliance, Franco-British alliance, Franco-Spanish alliance, Franco-Prussian alliance, Franco-Austrian alliance, Franco-Indian alliance, Franco-Vietnamese alliance, Franco-American alliance. This is the key point right here. Franco-American alliance was the 1778 alliance between the Kingdom of France, not Great Britain. The Kingdom of France, not Great Britain. You hear that? The Franco-American alliance was the 1778 alliance between the Kingdom of France and the United States during the American Revolutionary War. All right? So whatever King George did in 1783 is irrelevant. All right? The Treaty of Alliance, Franco-American Alliance War, was at the time of the American Revolutionary War, formalized in 1778 as the Treaty of Alliance. It was a military pact in which French provided many supplies for Americans. The Netherlands and Spain later joined as allies of France, Britain, and no European part stuff. The Netherlands and Spain later joined as allies of France. Britain had no European ally. The French allies was possible once the Americans captured a British invasion army at Saratoga in October 1777. Demonstrating the viability of the American cause, the alliance became controversial after 1793, when Great Britain and Revolutionary France again went to war and the United States declared itself neutral. Relations between France and the United States worsened as the latter became closer to the Britain Trade Treaty of 1795, leading to the undeclared quasi-war. The alliance was defunct by 1794 and formally ended in 1800. All right? Everybody see that. So all the alliances made with the French Empire from 1777 with all the different nations of the world were all made in conflict with the Anglo-Saxon burghers, all right? Because they were trying to take over their state. Because if you see King Edgar holding the Crucifer Globus, he's holding the world in his hand, and he being the Anglo-Saxon burgher, he's associated with the Anglo spirit because the European and Asian spirit and the African spirit was associated with the sons of Noah when the earth was repopulated, all right? Which is the abstract story, because the abstract story is the story of conquest, slavery, and commerce, all right? We must understand the narrative. So in closing, in lieu of the Exchequer, which is the current account of the Exchequer of Jews, and those counts are to be brought into questioning through the Exchequer of Pleas or the Court of Common Pleas, which is called a Court of Chancery under the Lord Chancellor, which is keeper of the King's consciousness. What King's consciousness? Not Britain, not Ireland, not Scotland, not the UK, but that of the Anglo-Saxon burghers, which I represent today, which we qualify in case law in Ray Van Winkle, in lieu of closing. Case is in Ray Van Winkle, 1950 case, Supreme Court, New Jersey decision. Everybody see that? Yes, sir. So in closing, in Ray Winkle, Van Winkle, Rip Van Winkle. Remember that song? Rip Van Winkle fell a hell of asleep? Something like that. 1950 case by Supreme Court, New Jersey. This case involves a prerogative writ of habeas corpus. All right. In closing, we should proceed to determine the question of the jurisdiction of the county court to issue a writ of habeas corpus. Respondent contends that the county court had jurisdiction to issue the writ of habeas corpus is based upon the following reasons. The county court is the successor to the former Court of Common Pleas. You hear that? The latter mentioned court succeeded to all the rights inherited in the English Court of Common Pleas. Habeas corpus was a common law writ. The Court of Common Pleas in England had the common law right to issue a writ, and that ergo, the present county court have the inherent common law right to issue such a writ. An examination of the law and history of our county courts lead us to the contrary conclusion. By the 1947 Constitution and legislators thereunder, the jurisdiction of the Court of Common Pleas was preserved and made to form a part of the jurisdiction of the county court. 1947 Constitution, Article 6, Section 1, Paragraph 1, Article 6, Section 4, Paragraph 1, Article 11, Section 4, Paragraph 2 and 4, Article 11, Section 1, and Paragraph 2, Public Law 1948, Caption 368. The county court accordingly has been invested with the jurisdiction of the former Common Pleas Court, as well as the former Orphans Court, the courts of Oyers and Terminers. This will be what we call the assize courts, based upon the Assize Act of 1166, which was brought forth by the declaring the Constitution of 1166, which was passed by who? The inventor of the common law, Henry II, son of Godfrey, the fifth Caliban Jew. The Common Pleas Courts, the origin of which is traced to the ordinance of Lord Cornbury in 1704, when it was under the crown, was preserved inferentially by the 1706 Constitution, Article 22, which we discussed in the last lecture, and was retained by the 1844 Constitution since at that time of the adoption of that Constitution, it was one of the inferior courts as now exists. 1844 Constitution, Article 6, Section 1, Paragraph 1, since the county court is presently vested with the jurisdiction of the former Common Pleas Courts, it becomes necessary in pursuing the problem to ascertain the nature and extent of the common law jurisdiction of the Common Pleas Courts and whether such jurisdiction includes the right to issue a writ of habeas corpus. It had been determined by our courts that the Common Pleas Court was a constitutional court of record having, i.e., carrying account, was a constitutional court of record having general jurisdiction over common law actions, inter partes, and proceedings thereon according to the course of the common law. It has also been established that the writ of habeas corpus was a common law writ, that English courts of common pleas had common law jurisdiction to issue the writ is not questioned. See in Ray Thompson Super, wherein the subject is fully discussed and wherein the courts quote. This is what they quote. The origin of this common law jurisdiction over the writ of habeas corpus, the origin of this common law jurisdiction over the writ of habeas corpus is lost in antiquity. It was, we have seen from the history of the writ, undoubtedly exercised before the Magna Carta, and extends to all cases of illegal imprisonment, whether claimed under public or private authority. It was exercised by the Court of Chancery, the King's Bench, Common Pleas, and Exchequer. Did y'all hear that? This is Supreme Court of New Jersey, 1950. The inquiry then to pursue is whether the common law powers and jurisdiction of the English Court of Common Pleas to issue a writ of habeas corpus has ever become a part of the general common law powers and jurisdiction which vested in our former Court of Common Pleas. Such inquiry leads to the negative determination. See, Edward Keithby Lawyers, New Jersey. I got this book, which I'll show you before I close out. It was the Supreme Court that expressly given the jurisdiction of the Court of Common Pleas of England. The Court of Common Pleas of New Jersey had that jurisdiction only insofar as it was constituted a common law court of civil jurisdiction between party and party. It was expressly deprived of the right to try titles to lands, which was originally the special function of the English Court of Common Pleas. Did you hear that? So they deprived us of our right to question title to land in regards to an interest in land because of the Chancery Court was dealt with equity versus criminal civil court that was dealt with matters of party. All right? Very important for you to understand that. The name of the Common Pleas was given to the County Court of Civil Jurisdiction in New Jersey in the first ordinance of Lord Cornbury in 1703. And the name was not taken directly from the English court, but from a court already existing in New York. A history of the origin and jurisdiction of the Common Pleas Court in this state is given in one of our earlier cases, Case state, Duffer Pros, wherever it is, versus DeQ, 1865 case, wherein is related that the Common Pleas Court was a provincial court established by the ordinance of the Lord Cornbury in 1704, which ordinance declared, in closing, that the several and respective courts of pleas hereby established to have power and jurisdiction to hear, try, and finally determine all actions or causes of action in all matters and things tribal at common law, of what nature or kind or what nature or kind soever, and is further provided that there should be held and kept at the sites at the cities or towns of Perth Amboy and Burlington, alternatively, a Supreme Court of Judicature, which Supreme Court is hereby fully empowered to have cognizance of pleas, civil and criminal, and mixed as fully and amply to all intent and purposes whatsoever as the courts of the King's Bench or the King's Bench or Common Pleas Exchequer within her or his Majesty's Kingdom of England, etc. Did y'all hear that? So in closing, Supreme Court of New Jersey from Edward Keesby, Courts and Lawyers of New Jersey from 1661 to 1912. I don't know if you can see the cover. What we're reading from. And this is the name of the title. The Courts and Lawyers of New Jersey, 1661 to 1912 by Edward Keesby, a district court judge. All right. This is one of the last chapters of the book concerning the Supreme Court of New Jersey, which we just read in the case law, concerning the authority that the Supreme Court had. Thank you for your salutations. These are those Jews. And look, how do you see? These are the justices of your latter Supreme Court. It's not applicable outside of the Third Timothy English Church, Brother Spencer from the House of Spencer. Outside of our church, you can't use it. All right? Because the church represents the estate. All right? No one has access to that estate but the king. All right? That's why it's called what's it called? Somebody help me out. It's called church property. You can't separate it from the church. It means dead pledge. Got the term. It'll come to me. Means dead pledge. Forgot. It'll come to me. All right. Here. All right, get that right here. So in closing, Supreme Court of New Jersey, Chapter 30, XXX. No definition of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court or of any of other no definition of the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court or of any of other courts is to be found in the Constitution of 1844. And slight mention of the court is made in the Constitution of 1776. It was the act of legislature of October 2nd, 1776. William Patterson declared, not William Patterson. Actually, it was William Patterson. He took over and overthrew the royal government. That the several courts of law and equity of the state should be confirmed and established to continue to be held with the like powers under the present government as they were held at and before the Declaration of Independence lately made by the Honorable Continental Congress. Ordinary Anglo-Saxon courts of public justice were the county courts of the 100 courts, i.e. shire court. The business of the king was not to see justice done in the ordinary course, but to exercise special and reserved powers, which a man must not invoke unless he failed to get its cause heard and the jurisdiction of his own 100. All right? Under the early Norman king, there is the beginning of a career region, but it was at first but it was at first the main court only for great men and great causes, which was written. Local courts, communal and signorio, were the ordinary tribunals for ordinary causes. The king's justice was still extraordinary, even the pleas of the crown were for the most part had heard by the sheriff and the shire moves. Then again, the king's court was not in permanent session. Under 2 Williams, the name career regions came to be born only by those great assemblages that collect around the king thrice a year when he wears his crown on the great festival of the church. Under Henry II, something that is more like permanent tribunal, a group of justiciaries presided over by a chief justiciar becomes apparent. Twice a year, this group, taking the name of Exchequer, sat around the checker table, received the royal revenue, and audited the sheriff's account and did incidental justice. From time to time, some of its members would be sent through the counties to hear the pleas of the crown, and litigants who were great men began to find it worthwhile to bring their case before the powerful tribunal. This is called an intended report, right? In 1178, temporary Henry II, there appears a tendency to a division in the career regions, which became the Court of Common Bench or Common Pleas, a court which should hear common pleas and not pleas of the crown. The bench in John's reign often sat at Westminster Hall, but not always. In the Magna Carta provided that common pleas should cease to follow the king and should remain in some fixed place, and so the common bench became a really distinct court inferior to the court held in Career Regis. In 1234, the 2 courts began to roll their proceedings on 2 different rolls, and we get from this time the rolls of Career Regis and the rolls of Banco. In the time of Locote, when the local feudals and manor royal courts had declined, the jurisdiction at common law was exercised by 3 royal courts: the King's Bench, the Common Pleas, and that of what we call Exchequer. Okay, that of Exchequer. All right. In order for you to be able to sit amongst the king or his council, which would be lawyers, all right, you had to be a wise man, all right, meaning that you had to understand law in regard to protecting the king's estate, all right, as keeper of the king's conscience, especially when you're dealing with the king's property, which is called the Lord Chancellor of the courts of Chancery or the courts of Exchequer, dealing with the Jews of Exchequer, which stole the property from the king, all right? This is the reason why you all had to be retrained again, all right? So where you're sitting at now, based off the office of King Edward the Peaceful, which I'm the reincarnation of, in regard to the Exchequer, all right, the chessboard, you have now been taught by way of Clifford's Inn. And Clifford's Inn is where those lawyers go to get taught, all right? They go and break bread, all right? And in the abstract story, it's called the Sentinel, all right? Cynical. Let's review that before we close out. Cynical. The cynical from Latin cynicolium, dining room, also known as the upper room, from Koine Greek and Anugium and Hyperium, both meaning upper room. It's a room in Mount Zion in Jerusalem, just outside the city wall, not inside the city wall, but outside the city wall. Traditionally held to be the site of the Last Supper, the final meal that in the gospel account Jesus held with his apostles. Right? According to the Christian Bible, the synagogue was the place in which the apostles continued to gather after the Last Supper, and it was also the site where the Holy Spirit alighted upon the 11 apostles on Pentecost. The site is administered by the Israelite authorities as part of the building holding the so-called David tombs on the ground floor. Crusader period building. After the First Crusade, the leaders of the newly established Kingdom of Jerusalem, Godfrey of Bouillon, refounded the church as a Latin abbey, and the 12th century and the basilica was rebuilt. The basilica was either repaired or enclosed by the Crusaders' church, occupying a portion of 2 aisles of the right southern side of the altar. The Crusaders' cathedral was destroyed soon after in the 12th and 13th century, but the synagogue remained. Today, part of the site upon which the Byzantine Crusaders church stood is believed to be occupied by a smaller church of Dormiton and its abbey. So as we can see, the story concerning Christ's crucifixion, associated with the crown of thorns, and Christ's resurrection, which is associated with the Shroud of Turin, we all see was in the hands of the Capuchin king Louis IX. All right, Louis IX, who took place in the 7th, 8th, and 9th Crusade, which ended in what we call Tunis of Tripoli, which is the capital city of Tunisia. Tunis is the capital city of Tunisia, where the last crusade took place concerning those Arabs and those Jews who are occupying the city of Tunisia, the occupied city of Tunisia, where those Berbers were situated, called Libya and Berber. So in order for you to get that clarity, you must get that studentry. And that studentry is understanding time immemorial from a legal perspective, all right? Which means time out of mind, all right? So we learned that by way of the Third Typical English Church of England and this upper room, because this is considered the upper room, all right? The place where I, the reincarnation, Christ-like entity called the reincarnation of King Edward the Peaceful, have brought you back to the overstanding of who you truly are. And that was the purpose and intent for the synagogue, which we call the upper room, which I'll bring you to in this closing. Clifford's Inn. As my first name was found in Herefordshire. Clifford's Inn. Clifford Inn is the name of both a former Inns of Chancery and London and presentation and present mansion block on the same site. It is located between Fetter Lane and Clifford's Inn Passage, which runs between Fleet Street and Chancery Lane and the city of London. History of the Inns of Chancery. The Inns of Chancery, evolving tandem with the Inns of Courts during the 12th, 13th century laws, was taught in the city of London primarily by the clergy. You hear that? However, during the 13th century, 2 events happened which diminished this form of legal education. Firstly, a decree by Henry III, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey V, Canal and Banking, stated that no institute of legal education could exist in the city of London. And secondly, a papal bull prohibited clergy from teaching law in London. This is when they fell off track, all right? Consequently, the system of legal education dispersed, with lawyers instead settling on the outskirts of the city of London, but as close as possible to Westminster Hall, where the signing of the Magna Carta had led to the establishment of a permanent court, all right? The King's Court. Governance and structure. Governance and structure of the Inns of Chancery. Clifford Inn was ruled by its council, which was led by the principal, i.e. the king. As well as the principal, the council consisted of 12 barristers. Remember the 12 disciples, Jesus, all elected by the inn members and who enjoyed certain rights. They could hold chambers whenever they wanted and sat at a separate upper table separate upper table to dine. The principal was elected by the entire inn membership and was tasked with overseeing its day-to-day runnings and supervision of the inn servants. His privileges included the right to choose from any one of the 18 sets of chambers and generous allowance for beer. Principals were originally elected for life, but the subsequent to the council order dated 15th of June, 1668, they were subject to re-election every 3 years. However, between 1668 and the last election of 1890, only 21 members served as the principals of Clifford Inn, since one elected always elected unless confirmed became customary practice. So as we can see, the bench, or what we call the bar association or the members of the bar, all were established from the ends of Chancery, which we call the inner temple, outer temple, and middle temple, which all stems from Clifford Inn, and which would consist of barristers. And we know barristers, esquires, lawyers, etc. are synonymous. Okay? So I covered everything. All right, so with that, we're going to stop my share. I'm going to open up the floor for questioning in regards to the subject matter discussed today on this lecture only. All right? If there are any questions, go ahead and shoot. Thank you once again, brother Spencer from the House of Spencer, for your comments, as well as for your dialogue, as well as for your recognition, your observance of what's being brought before you. We really appreciate it, right? As well as I know the students or members or family of the 13th English Church of England honor you as well for your unbiased as well as your canon decor, right? We really appreciate you, right? I'm assuming that there's no question based upon what's presented today. So with all sayings for here from the 13th Church of England, I'm gonna greet you as I meet you in peace and love. All those who were privy to this lecture, please pass this information around, get it out to other podcasters. We open to doing lectures, open to doing dialogues, but no one wants uh, uh, wants to trespass that ground. Why? Because they understand that it's vital as well as it's vulnerable position that they will be in as a result of the standing that they're in. All right. So with that, take one more picture of me reincarnated as King Edgar the Peaceful. Right. King Edgar the Peaceful, holding the Crucifer Globus, which is the globe of the world concerning all the inhabitants of the world. All right. The only thing, if you see the Crucifer Globus, they're only dealing with, if you see it on the T&O cross, they're only dealing with north, south, and west. All right, because there's only 3 spots on that T&O cross. No one's talking about the east. All right, they're talking about the north, the south, and the west. No one's talking about the east because within that globe, you see a capital T because Christ is there. Now, when you see King Edgar the Peaceful, you see a T on the cross, but it's not a cross with 3 arms, 3 limbs. It is a cross with 4 limbs, meaning that the understanding of the north, south, and west cannot be understood until you understand the east. And the east is dealing with the eastern part of what we call North America. All right. So I love you. I want all of you to come home, and the doors are open. All right. But this is your choice. Like Brother Spencer says, the fork of the road is the Roman Catholic Church or the Scottish Church or the Oxenasi Jews who migrated to England and stole their birth. Okay? This is not being biased. This is just giving you the facts. Okay? With that, I love you all, and I greet you as I meet you in peace and